peer review as it stands is not an investigative process. It is not a fault finding process. I think the whole objective of a peer review, why it was commissioned, was predominantly to assist a firm to improve its quality review process. However, if you find that majority of the times there has been disputes between the practice units and the peer reviewers, and that's where it got somewhere lost the relevance. So I think we need to come back the distinction between a peer review process, which is only to strengthen the practice unit or those professionals who are practicing to carry out the statutory audit. It is to strengthen them. It is not in any way to pull them down and make sure that they are lower than compared to the other professionals. The objective, that is the reason why it was commissioned. And if you were to see the peer review itself, the definition, it's someone who is of a similar standing. That means a chartered accountant who has already been in practice is a person who will come and review. And what for? It basically means that he'll do a review of the work done by the professionals who have got a similar standing. And that's the whole process of a peer review. And what does he look at? Basically looks at the quality of the attestation. Then what is the quality that has gone through when you're issuing an audit report? Whether the entity or the reviews or the practice units have actually complied with the technical standards, have complied with the accounting standards, have they complied with auditing standards, have they complied with independence, have they complied with quality control standards. These are some of the things which are generally looked through a peer review process. And this is basically constituted by a board called the Peer Review Board. This was formed in the year 2002. And if you see basically from 2002 to 2010, it's only when the SEBI started insisting on for any auditor to be for any of the CA firm to be an auditor of a listed company, need to submit a peer review certificate. And it got prominence only from the year 2010. Between 2002 and 2010, it was more like something like a firm used to get it reviewed. Only when something becomes mandatory, it's that point in time when the CA firm starts looking at to get their firm reviewed under the peer review board and get the peer review certificate. Usually the peer review certificate is valid for a period of 3 years. Again, depending upon the number of years that the CA firm is in, accordingly it will be done. Now, the objective, as I said, is only to maintain enhanced quality. This is only to improve the performance of practice units. Now, if you take this objective, there is a senior person who has got a similar standing, who has got a knowledge, comes back and recommends saying that you need to comply with A, B, and C. You have not complied with SCUC. You have complied with the, you need to have work more on working documentation. This is nothing but to improve the performance of the practice unit. And that is where you would see many of the practice units, if you volunteer yourself to the peer review board and say, we want the firm to be peer reviewed because we want to enhance our quality of performance, I think probably the objective of the peer review board would be achieved. Otherwise, it becomes a challenge. As is mentioned, peer review is mandatory only for listed companies or for central statutory auditors. There are levels on which each of the firms needs to get peer reviewed, whether it's a level 1, level 2, and level 3. I'll talk about that. Peer review basically today is only talks about attestation services. What does it include? Auditing, verification of financial transactions, accounts, preparation and certification of financial accounting. All of these are covered. Tax audits are covered. Now, somebody was asking in one of the other time, why is GST not included? I think going forward, GST also would be included and subjected to peer review. I think these are some of the things which are very, very critical. If you are a firm of standing which carries out attestation service, basically an audit or a certification, those firms will need to be subjected to peer review. Now, if you need to carry out an audit of any listed company, it is mandatory under the listing agreement to have the peer review, a valid peer review certificate. Before the appointment, the board of directors or those charged with governance, the audit committee, will need to seek the information whether your firm is subjected to any peer review, and please provide us a copy of the peer review certificate. Now, what are the technical standards that are included? It includes accounting standards issued by ICI, by MCA, by RBI, by any standards that have been issued. The standards on auditing issued by AASB, MCA, NFRA, all of these which are covered under the Companies Act. Any guidances issued by ICI, any directions which have been issued by the ICI, any of the regulations or directions issued by MCA, by SEBI, by RBI, by IRDA, by any of these agencies, whichever issues for the purpose of statutory audit, those relevant statutes will be reviewed when a practice unit is selected for a peer review. What is the scope of a peer review? A scope of a peer review typically is for a period of 3 years. So for a 3 completed financial years is what a peer review would be selected. Somebody might ask, why don't you do it every year? I think the process is, it takes time, and it is very appropriate to have done once in 3 years so that the peer review certificate is issued for a period of 3 years. What should the review focus? As I mentioned to you, it's the technical standards, it's the quality of reporting, it's the office systems and procedures in respect to compliance to attestation services. Most important, it's the training programs for staff. Training programs is not, the training program means that what you've attended in a CPE sector. For example, right now you're doing an unstructured CPE learning. That is not what is a training program. A training program needs to be divided between an internal training program and an external training program. An internal training program is different for each of the practice units. Suppose if I have a firm which has got branches across all over the country, I've got branches across the globe, my way of doing training is different from those which have only proprietary, which has only limited number of people. So therefore, all of these systems, procedures relating to training has to be looked at it, both in terms of the firm's policies and procedures, and also external in terms of the technical standards and compliance to various laws. So therefore, it is important that a training is not the training program which is conducted by ICI alone. The training program includes both internal as well as the external. So therefore, this becomes very, very essential. Objectives, it is a repetitive, is again talks about technical standards, making sure there is a proper systems, making sure there are no non-compliance to quality control standards. These are some of the things which are very, very essential. Now, one of the key things and a decision taken by the peer review board is in respect of the extension of the validity of the peer review certificate. What did they say? Because there has been a lockdown, it is not practically possible for the peer reviewer to go and get it peer reviewed, nor it is practically possible because of the lockdown for the practice unit to apply and get that reviewed. And therefore, any firm which held a peer review certificate which expired between the period April 1st and March 24th was given an extension until 2021. So therefore, for 1 more year, that report is valid. That means whatever was the report that was valid in the previous period, especially for the period between 2014 and 17, because we are talking about for 3 years. So therefore, it becomes essential that those firms which held, which was for which this certificate got expired during this period, can hold and can utilize the same certificate issued in the earlier period, which was valid until 2020. So therefore, this was one extension which was given, provided there were no observations which was in respect of the earlier certificate. So therefore, it becomes very, very essential. That means there should not be any observation in the earlier valid certificate which was issued to the peer reviewer. Now, what was a global scenario? Again, there is a distinction between a global scenario which was in India and a global scenario which is the scenario in India and the global scenario. Global scenario, the objective which was again formed in 1930s was to enhance the quality performance of the practice unit, at the same time involve the disciplinary proceedings against that practice unit which has not complied. This is a significant distinction between the peer review in India and the peer review abroad in global. That means disciplinary proceedings are not taken, actions are taken against the practice unit. At best, the practice unit do not get a peer review certificate. However, if the peer reviewer thinks that company has not complied, as has been in violation of any of the regulations of the ICI or any of the MCA, then they can report to the ICI peer review board. Peer review board, based on its decision about the quality, can or may take an action against the practitioner or can refer to disciplinary proceedings. However, till date, I do not see any such instances which has been carried out for those practice units which have not complied with. However, given NEFRA which has come through, and I think this is very, very essential. And if you see NEFRA, the way they have brought in, it not only covers the listed entities, it also covers those unlisted entities, which is a threshold about 500 crores. So therefore, it is essential, irrespective of whether your firm has been subjected to peer review or not, whether an action has been taken by the peer review board on the practice unit or not, it is important that given the new scenario coming arising out of NEFRA, it is very, very essential for the practice units which are carrying out audit of listed entities or those which are meeting the threshold to comply with all reporting standards, all requirements and the auditing guidances, or everything should be complied with. Now, peer reviewers are basically, who are the reviewers? Again, these reviewers are nothing but those people who have got a standing, who are the chartered accountants who are registered with the ICI. Now, what are the duties of the peer review board? They can call for information and records from the practice units. They can suo motu do that. They don't have to wait for the practice unit to apply. They can suo motu do it. They can arrange and organize for training or orientation program for the reviewers and the practice unit. They can prescribe procedures to the practice units or to the peer review. They also have the authority and responsibility to maintain a panel of reviewers. There have been at most requests received from the peer review board asking for many of the practicing chartered accountants to nominate themselves as peer reviewers. I think this is another area where the peer review chairman has been insisting, saying that we are short of the peer reviewers. We need more peer reviewers. However, given whatever the information that the panels which are existing right now with the peer review board, there is still the option that is given to the practice unit to select. So therefore, even if you choose to be a peer reviewer, it may have a situation where you may not be selected because the practice unit may not want you. So I think there is this gap, but still there is a dearth for the peer reviewers. And I think we encourage many of the practice units to nominate themselves or empanel themselves with the peer review board. Now, there are formats that has been prescribed. They're getting updated. You can always go to ici.org. Under that, you have the peer review. The peer review board has updated various manuals, various notifications as to how the peer review is done. Now, which are the firms which are subjected to review? Again, it's very essential. There are two levels. I would say there are three levels, but of which the two levels are very, very critical. At this point in time, the focus by the peer review board has been only at level 1. Again, because many of the companies, many of the practice units are auditing listed companies, and therefore it is mandatory because prescribed by the SEBI, then the practice units voluntarily themselves go to the peer review board and says, please have the peer review done so that we get the peer review certificate. Again, my recommendation to all the practicing chartered accountants, all the practice units, is that if your peer review certificate is getting expired, let's say during the month of March 2020, please do not wait till March 2020 and then write to the peer review board to commission a peer review. Instead, the whole peer review process has to be done within a period of 4 months. Assuming there are delays or something like that, make sure you plan at least by August of 2019 or September of 2019 to get the peer review done by March 2020. I think this is only an instance that I'm providing. Somebody might ask, already it has passed by, what is that irrelevance? I'm only giving you as an illustration that if your peer review certificates got expired in March 20, make sure that as a practice unit, you voluntarily go to the peer review board, write to the peer review board, state that you want the firm to be subjected to peer review, and therefore this is what is required. And especially for practice units which are handling larger listed companies, this becomes very, very essential because you need to place to the various companies, audit committees, or the board when they are appointing you as the statutory auditors of that entity. Now, which are the ones? Basically, level one includes central statutory auditors of the public sector banks or private sector banks or foreign banks or public financial institutions. It includes public sector undertakings, basically your C&AGs, the central statutory auditors of insurance companies, or those equity or debt listed in India or abroad, or any donations or contribution more than 50 crores, or funded by central or state government, or net worth which is more than 500 crores, or any of those where you carry out audit of the mutual fund schemes. All of these gets covered under level one. So therefore, if your firm is involved in carrying out the audit of these which are listed under level one, make sure that your practice unit is subjected to peer review, and the peer review, once it is completed, you hold a valid peer review certificate. There is also level two. Now, if you look at level two, not so much of focus has been given, not so much of focus both by the practice unit as well as by the peer review board. Basically, it talks about statutory audit of the following. What is it? Statutory internal concurrent systems tax audit or departmental review of branches, offices of public sector banks, private sector foreign banks, regional rural banks, NBFCs, net worth, which is about more than 50 crores. All of these gets covered. Now, right now, the focus by the peer review board has not been under level two. Suppose you are auditing under this, and even now, this has not been insisted by the Reserve Bank of India or by any other public financial institution or by any of the government undertakings. Even if you carry out, if this is what is looked at by those respective regulators, probably even your member firm, which was not included, or the practice unit, which was not included under level two, may require you to get a peer review done. Now, what does it mean? There's a distinction in level one and level two. Level one is for a period of 3 years. Level two is for a period of 4 years. Level four, the focus is not much. Even for level three, which is not covered under level one or level two, is covered under level three. So the level three is right now, as much as only level one is covered, level two is not covered, and level three definitely is not even in the picture. But in the interest of all the practice units which are carrying out audit of listed companies or intend to audit, become the central statutory auditors of a banks or a foreign bank or a financial institutions, make sure you hold a valid peer review certificate. Now, the need for a peer review, as I said, it's only to enhance the quality of service. I think that's the sole objective. It's also an affirmative, also to confirm that all the firms that are subjected are complying with the ICI guidelines, are complying with the MCA guidelines, are complying with the Companies Act, are we complying with RBI, complying with IRDA guidelines, are complying with various other guidelines issued by even the utilities companies. What is the process? As much as selection is level one, level two, and level three, even the process is stage one, stage two, and stage three. The moment you empanel, you come first, you have an empanel. The peer review board has an empanelment form which you can go ahead, and if you have got the experience, then you can empanel. Once you're empaneled, either voluntarily the practice unit, because they need to have a certificate, or the peer review board can then by themselves identify which are the firms which will be subject to peer review. So they might identify, so therefore it becomes a selection. So the moment you select, then you send the intimation to the practice unit. The time clock starts from there. That's where you start the planning. Once the planning happens, once you identify who's a peer reviewer, who will come to do a peer review, there is a list which is given. Of the list of 3, you can identify somebody whom you think you're comfortable with at this point in time. But I would say identify somebody who can do value add, not somebody with whom you are comfortable with. There is a distinction, because somebody with whom you are comfortable with might come back and not give you something which will help you to enhance the quality of your own firm. Someone who's of a standing whom you think is tough, if you bring him as a peer, you probably can give you, he can educate you, he can guide you and enhance the quality of the documentation or the quality and manner in which you should carry out the audit. So therefore, it depends on the practice unit. How do they want it? Is peer review certificate a tick in a box, or peer review is a matter where you enhance the quality of your own firm when it comes to either delivery of an audit or reporting on that audit. So therefore, it is very, very essential. There are 3 stages that goes for a peer review. Stage 1, which involves planning. Stage 2, where the peer review comes to the practice unit. That's where the execution happens. Stage 3 is where once the peer review completes, it becomes a reporting. So stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. As I mentioned to you, there is some refinement that is happening in the peer review board. At this point in time, if you have got a 10 years of experience and you're practicing as a chartered accountant and you're practicing in various aspects of it, you can empanel with the peer review board. But suppose you want to do a peer review of a listed entity, then you need to have minimum of 15 years. You in practice, then you can empanel, then you can go and do a peer review of those entities which comes under the level 1 entity. Otherwise, you will be doing entities basically under the level 2 or level 3 entities. Very important, you cannot be someone who is working in industry, but someone who is actually having a practice. So only those people who are in practice can be involved to do a peer review. Selection again, either Sumoto or the peer review board can identify and select a firm, and then they can be subjected to peer review. As I mentioned to you, the peer review, once it is selected, the peer review is given a step option or a choice of reviewer from the list. So they might select from a list of 3. From the 3, you can look at which is the reviewer who can come and do a review. And a detailed questionnaire is shared with the practice unit. The practice unit needs to complete within 21 days and submit to the peer review board as well as the peer reviewer. Now, what is important? Now, is there a choice that is there with the practice unit to select which files to be conducted, or is it the peer review who's got the option to select? Here it is very important. It is only the peer reviewer who will identify from the list or the inventory of what is the work that you've carried out over a period of 3 years. It could be a statutory audit of a large company. It could be a tax audit of a small company or a large company. It could be a bank audits. It could be private limited companies. He can select anything. He can select at the head office. He can select something from the branch. He can do anything based on his selections, which he thinks he is comfortable to complete. Then he will send out the list of all of those files which he wants to review it. Now, the biggest challenge which the peer review faces, and this is always raised in every peer review discussion with the board. The saying is that the practice unit does not provide information on a timely basis, or the practice unit says that the person who has done the audit has left the organization, or the records you moved from one other office to the other office, and therefore you need more time. Now, just pause back. If you are complying to the standards on auditing, the most important standard of auditing under the auditing standards is standards on quality control 1, called SQC1, which is mandatory from the year 2007 for all those firms which carry out audit of historical financial information or review of financial information or any attest services. So this is mandatory. And if you see the quality review board report also, you will find significant non-compliance only in auditing standards. There are non-compliance in accounting standards also, but majority of the observations comes through in SQC1. Now, having said this, it becomes important for every firm which is involved in the audit should comply with SQC1. The moment you comply with SQC1, trust me, everything will be compliant. And one of the requirements of the SQC1 is assembling of working papers within a period of 60 days from the date when you issue audit report. Now, if you are doing historically, something between 2014 and 2017. Now you're covering between 2017 and 2020. 60 days is lapsed already for 18, 19, and 20. Maybe 20 not, but 18 and 19. You cannot be saying that I don't have access to the files, the file was not there, the people were not there, and all of this. I think this becomes very, very essential. So therefore, the responsibility of the practice unit to say that he does not have, he's dependent on people, or the people not being there, or you do not have time to extract, or you're busy in somewhere. Objective is lost the moment you use these matters when a peer reviewer comes. Because the requirement under the SQC says that you should have assembled the file. The moment you've done the audit, assemble the file, put it in a separate place where nobody can access it, or even if you access it, it is accessed with appropriate controls. Now, when that being the case, majority of the time you will find, and that's the reason why you have observations in the QRB, and it will not be this, it is no different even in a peer review, and that's where the challenge comes when it comes to peer review. So I think the responsibility of the peer reviewer as well as the practice unit to ensure that you have all these done. Once the samples are selected by the peer reviewer, you will give it in writing 2 weeks in advance that what are the records that is required. So therefore, you already have a period which is lapsed. You have 2 weeks, 15 days to select. Then you know which are the ones to be done. You have another 12 days. So we are talking almost in a month. You have time to even think about which are the files which will be produced for verifications. Once you have that selected, the peer reviewer should now make a visit to the practice unit. Now, what is the responsibility? The moment peer reviewer walks into your office, the important thing is those who maintain the responsibility, or the leadership responsibility, or those who are the senior partners, or those who are involved in the audit engagement are present and make a presentation to the peer reviewer about the firm, about the quality process, about the training process, about how the independence is maintained, how the monitoring is mechanized, how the audit quality controls are exercised on the audit engagement, how do you select people on the engagement, how do you conduct reviews, how do you conduct trainings, how do you help people to grow within your organization. These are something which are very, very essential when you deal with those when the peer review visits in your office. So therefore, it is important. Assemble, put all of these information in a PowerPoint. If it is not PowerPoint, make sure that you present through oral, saying this is what you've done, or prepare a document and a Word document and present to the peer reviewer so that he understands the quality controls that are followed by the firm. He understands what are the procedures that was followed by the firm when carrying out an audit. It also understands what are the procedures that are followed for independence declarations or how the independence is monitored. He also understands how the acceptance and continuance of audit engagement is done. He also understands how the monitoring and the improvements are done by the firm. I think this becomes a very, very essential. The moment you identify that your firm is being subjected to peer review, if you're forefront in being prepared and explaining to the peer reviewer, this is what you have done, this is how you have carried out, this is how the training is done, this is how you assemble the file, this is how you're done, then the comfort on the controls, the comfort on the overall condition of the systems followed by the firm, the confidence with which a peer review commences is much, much higher. The moment the peer review comes, he says, these are the files, you carry out, you find it out and come back. And then you go back and say, these you could have asked, you could have discussed, we already is there, we have already, information is there. Because the time that is available to a peer review is limited to almost about 7 days. He has to complete the entire review within a period. While 1 month is lost in acceptance, everything, next 3 months is what he has to complete and issue a final report. So therefore, we are talking about a 90 days period plus a 30 days buffer period. About within 120 days, the whole peer review process should have been completed. Again, execution, I mentioned to you what is the initial meeting that has to be done. The peer reviewer can either visit the head office, can go and visit any of the branches. But again, my caution to the peer reviewers also is, please do not go and visit merely because you've got an opportunity to visit a branch. If the practice unit can get all the records to the central head office, make sure all of the audits or reviews are done in the. In case that is not possible, if suppose someone from the branches, suppose somebody from some other offices can come to the head office of the practice unit, please accept all of that. Give it in writing what are the records you want to review, information which are the clients you want to review, so that it facilitates even for the practice unit. Other important thing which is very, very important, and this is something which should be followed based on ethical standards. Merely because you're going to a firm to conduct a peer review, please do not copy, please do not get details of that entity that you're subjecting and then solicit certain works from that entity in which you are carrying out a peer review of that practice unit. It is very essential, because many times there have been complaints saying that the practice unit has not carried out. The peer review took that information of which clients they have done. They contacted the client and said, they can provide you much more because they can value added, and the practice unit has lost the job. So I think these, from an ethical perspective, as much as I expect the practice unit to be upfront, be vocal in trying to provide the information, be upfront in providing information. It is also the responsibility of the practice unit to prohibit or solicit any of the informations from the entity that you are reviewing or that files that you've selected to, which are subjected to peer review. Again, peer review is to help the practice unit to enhance the quality. So therefore, to the peer reviewers also, to make sure that you contribute to the learning, you contribute to the assistance of the practitioners to enhance their level of in doing audits. I think that will help the overall context of the audit carried out across India. The peer review should look at mandatorily at the 5 of the key controls. This is very, very mandatory, which I've been talking about. The independence, the maintenance of professional skills and standards, outside consultation, staff supervision and development, office administration. Now, again, office administration, one example that I've talked about was on the archive. Independence, I've talked about. Again, independence. Independence is not a declaration that you take every annually because a SQC requires you. Independence is that you will not deal with the client. You will not purchase in client. You will not maintain the personal wealth of the client. If you're doing an audit, you have to be independent of that. It is difficult for some small firms, some proprietor firms, some mid-sized firms, but as far as possible, make sure you're independent. I do understand in certain instances where the auditors are a part of the family man. If you're a part of the family man, that's where the independence issue comes up very, very difficult. And I think this is where you need to draw a line in between as to what is independence and what you declare as being independent. So this is very essential. The second part, which is generally done, is an outside consultations. For a convenience perspective, to meet an accounting objective of a client or to meet a result objective of a client, you might seek consultation from some CA firm and say, this CA firm has given me in writing. Let me tell you, there is no legal authority. There is no authority that is available for any CA firm to issue any guidances, because the only body which is involved to issue a guidance is the ICAI. You have the expert advisory committee, you can write to it. You might consult for a guidance, but you cannot take an accounting or an auditing writing consultation done. You might do an outside consultation for an actual valuation. You might do valuation outside consultation for a valuation of an asset. Those are the competencies in which those respective practitioners are there. In accounting and auditing, as far as possible, avoid yourself from taking opinions from the same firm. So you generally typically have a tendency to take from other firm an advice and use that advice for the purpose of issuing an audit opinion. That is not accepted because it does not conform to the accounting and auditing standard issued by the ICAI, whether it is the AASB or the Accounting Standards Board or by the MCA or by NEFA. Now, once you identify attestation sample, once the peer review gets the reliance or the number of things, he can adopt two approach. He can say, okay, fine, I understood the controls and systems and policies. I can do a compliance approach, or alternatively, I can do a substantive approach. The approach followed by a peer reviewer is no different from the approach that you'll follow in terms of auditing an entity. Whether it's a controlled testing or a substantive testing, a similar approach is followed by a peer reviewer. Now, again, in this controls that he looks at it is the audit. When it talks about compliance approach, it looks at the audit record administration, which is basically your record keeping. Now, if you look at it, it is mandatorily required for every CA firm to keep records at least for a minimum of 7 years, to archive and assemble the file within a period of 60 days. These are required. How is the administration done in respect of these specific aspects? This is something which needs to be looked at. Next, he needs to look at the financial statement presentations. Schedule 3, ICI guidelines, ICI, any other information, RBI guidelines, IRDA guidelines, Electricity Board guidelines, any guidelines that I should, whether the financial presentations are in accordance with those laws and statutes. Now, let me pause here. It's also important that a peer review cannot be doing a second guessing. It cannot say that, listen, you could have done provided more, you could have tested more, you could have done this, you could have done this. The peer reviewer can only say, if the standards on auditing have required you to do this, has the firm followed the procedures in letter and spirit? If the answer is yes, they have carried out. If they have not done, then you need to report as a peer reviewer. For the peer reviewer, the practice unit should equally be responsible to provide information and explanations that is required for the peer review to complete. So it includes how the internal control systems have been performed by the practice units, what are the substantive procedures performed, how is the audit conclusion involved, who are the people who are involved, has it been involved at the team level, has it been involved at the partners level, has it been involved at the leadership level, how is the audit report framed, are there any sufficient information that is available to give a clean opinion or a modified opinion or a qualified opinion or an adverse or a disclaimer opinion. All of these, for each of these, documentation is essential. SA 230 is very, very essential. So every practice unit should have documentation for all of these audits that you have carried out. Substantive effort approach is where it does not, where the practice unit specific controls are not looked at it. The peer review can do a substantive approach. That means he can go and look at each of the work papers. Stage 3, once the peer review is completed within a period of 7 days, he issues a preliminary report or an on-site review report. Now, what's the distinction between a quality review board and a peer review board? In a quality review board, the quality reviewer will issue even to the quality review board the preliminary report. Whereas in a peer review process, the peer reviewer only issues to the or communicates the preliminary report only to the practice unit. And the practice unit is given 21 days from the date of receipt to respond to it. Now let's assume that 21 days has lapsed. Then the peer reviewer can again check with the practice unit. If no further response received, then he can issue what is called an interim report. An interim report will bring about what are the observations which the peer reviewer has noted, what he has looked at it. If he is not satisfied, report to the peer review board, and the peer review board can go back and submit, can come back to the practice unit and say, we will come back to you because your systems and procedures are not in compliance. You have not followed the procedures which is laid down by ICI, and therefore we may be subjected after six months. Now, let's say even after that it is not done, after second time you still have certain observations, they can come back to you after a period of 12 months. Again, the responsibility lies with the practice unit to make sure they are in compliance with all the technical standards, with all the accounting standards, with all rules and regulations that are governing that. Now, the board can recommend wherever the weaknesses have been identified, help the practice units to give a period of 12 months or a 1 year to make sure all of these corrections are carried out. Now, if these corrections are carried out, voluntarily the practice units can do it, or alternatively, the peer review board can commission a peer review after the end of 12 months to see how the practice unit is performing. Again, if there are any deficiencies identified, a follow-up is looked at it by the peer reviewers. Now, once the final report, once the preliminary report is issued, once the comments are received from the practice unit, the peer review is satisfied to some extent or all the extent. If it does not have any observations, he gives a clean report. If he has got observations, then he identifies between those similarly to those what you issue in an audit report. If he wants to modify the report, he can modify the report. Based on the decision of the board, looking at the recommendations by the peer reviewer, this certificate can be issued by the board to the practice units. Again, what are the obligations? Now, this is very important. I've been stressing this. Obligation is both with the reviewers as well as with the practice unit. Provide any document or information that is required by the peer reviewer. This is very important. Number one. Two, always important that any explanation required, sit across and provide explanations. Three, make sure all assistance are done in connection with the peer review. If you cover all of these, then it is easier for the peer review to conduct. Similarly, peer reviewer should maintain confidentiality. He shall not use information that he has received during the peer review process and take that in records. No information, no work paper can be taken by the peer reviewer. He can only do what is called document his observation, his process, how he's followed, what it is. Again, there is a guidance or a formats that are prescribed under the peer review page of www.ici.org, which requires the working papers, which I'll talk about in the coming slides. The information that is given in the questionnaire and the information that is provided in the annexes, as far as possible, the peer review should not contradict. Somewhere he cannot say that the company has maintained all records and say yes, and in his report says that the company is not maintained. So there cannot be contradictions, there cannot be ambiguity. It should be very important that all the important observations are noted, are discussed with the practice unit before it goes in. He shall not extract any of the practice unit's information. The peer review should adhere to the timings, should discuss the draft report with the practice unit, should finalize report, and should also bill. Now, one important thing, as much as the responsibility of the professional who is involved as a peer reviewer, it is also your responsibility as a practice unit to pay the fees to the peer reviewer. Merely because he has created a lot of problems, you don't withhold his payment. I think as a professional standards or professional ethics or a very good governance, you should honor the commitment of making the fees, because the fees that are described is about 15 lakhs to a maximum of 1 lakh. It's not big. I think it's important because this certificate alone will help you to get exposure or get access to do an audit of a listed company. Inherent limitations, very true. It was not going to bring in any changes which relates to effectiveness. It is the inherent limitation that there are limitations which are there. It's not a foolproof. It is not a certificate to the practice unit that they are compliant with all accounting and reporting standards. There is a complete questionnaires which should be reviewed. Peer review questionnaire should be sent within 1 month, which talks about all of these. I'm not talking about it, but if you look at the division between part 1A talks about the profile of the practice unit, part B, which I've been specifically talking about, SQC1, which includes the leadership responsibility, ethical requirements, acceptance continuance, human resources, engagement performance, monitoring. My submission, my ask to all the practice units, all the professionals who are in practice, to make sure you adhere to the standards on quality control 1, which is very, very essential. Responsibility, I talked about it. You be the agent of change. Don't be the person to create problems for the practicing unit. I think that's the difference. If your mindset is to help others, the way you are helping somebody during a COVID situations, probably it is only enhancing and helping the person who have got weak to be more stronger. Other most important thing for the practice unit is what you have not documented is not work done. You cannot say that, sir, we have done, but we forgot to document. If you do not have documentation that demonstrates or that is evidenced by the peer reviewer, he can go ahead and comment saying that no work has been carried out, and that's where the dispute can keep coming. Peer review should identify the shortfalls in documentation, sit with the practice units and partners, impress upon the investment for proper documentation, tell them how it is important that if where there are significant challenges, what is the remediations to be followed. Always a value addition. As I said, you need to create value, and I think both for the practice unit as well as for the peer reviewers, you have to make sure that you are a value add to the practice unit, because the peer practice unit will learn from the experiences that you go through as a peer review by your recommendations, by your remediation process. There are benefits, and some of the practice units have really expressed it is not that it's always the peer review is a bad choice. Peer reviews have done a great job. They've got accolades from the practice units. I think it's both ways. You need to acknowledge both the practice units. The peer review should acknowledge if they've done a great job. The practice unit should acknowledge if the peer review has done a fantastic job. I think these are very, very important. Please expose all your staff, associates, to make sure that bring the importance of the standards on quality controls. You can ask the peer review to address the people to how to improve standards based on his experience. I think that'll be a great benefit for those people who are working with you. Standardization, preparation of audit programs, partners focus on development of clients, all of these becomes very, very essential. Advisories, there is a regular requirement that if you have to be a peer reviewer, you need to attend training programs. It is conducted very regularly. You see the peer review board almost conducts like in a quarter at least once. Please go and attend these training programs. Update yourself. Always, every peer review, you cannot sit back and say, I know everything. There is always changes that happens. Please update yourself. Look at the peer review manuals. Look at all of these. I think these are very, very essentials. Declaration, please do not make sure that you do not take people who do not work with you. Make sure you maintain confidentiality. You make sure that you maintain to all the guidelines that are issued by the peer review board, and you does not disqualify. Let me pause here. One of the key aspects of the peer reviewers is you can't say I have done the work, but I have not documented. Equally, a peer reviewer should document all the review findings in a work paper using the same principle of SA 230. He shall obtain the written representation from the practice unit using SA 580. He should agree to the terms of engagement using SA 210. He should continue to use SA 700, 701, 705 when he is issuing a peer review report. He should look at the only advantage, not 701, SA 700 and 705 and 706. The only distinction between a peer review report as well as any other audit report is that there is no UDI required to issue a peer review report. Peer reviewer should use his personal letterhead so that it contains all these numbers and all of this. The timings, it starts from day 1 and it goes up to day 90. This is something which is already there. I'm not getting to it, but it's essential that both the peer practice unit as well as the peer review exercise their responsibilities when they get the peer reviews process completed, and so that they get the peer review certificate on a timely basis. Finally, if you look at it, the message from the peer review board and the peer review is we should build a constructive and honest community of chartered accountants, and this is very essential because if you want to maintain if you have to conserve the profession, if you want this profession to go for another 70 years, another 100 years, it is we as professionals should demonstrate the quality of the audit work that we carry out, the quality of the documentation that we maintain, and how do we represent as professionals to the outside. I think this is very, very essential.